Former US Congressman Ron Paul, who I'm pleased to say joins us live now. Good evening to you, Ron. What do you make of this situation? Then again, we're seeing a flashpoint in this part of Syria. Again, it's in this so-called deconfliction zone.
Oh, well, you know, I think that's all a gimmick on our part to try to distinguish between what Russia did along with the Syrian government. Of course, they were trying to de-escalate, and then the United States went in there and decided they'd have their own zone and then demand that it not be violated, which, of course, I strongly oppose. I think that the sovereignty of that government should have been respected. I don't think that we as a country should be involved over there. That's been my position generally as a libertarian, that we should be so much less involved over there. And this is a good example of getting involved when it looks like there's an attempt to de-escalate the war and sort some of these things out. But our position is sort of bizarre because at one moment we're against ISIS, the next moment we do things that actually helps ISIS. And I think this circumstance of those bombs that we bombed actually was helpful to ISIS. So therefore, I think it's a bad policy on our part and doesn't help the situation in Syria.
And there's a danger, Ron, isn't there, that this could actually see a conflict generate between the Syrian government forces now and America directly?
Well, this to me is getting very dangerous, and that's why, you know, for a good many months, if not years, I've been advocating that we shouldn't be involved over there. Especially, it changed the relationship between the United States and Russia. And I thought it was much better the way things had gone after the Cold War ended. I liked the idea that we were talking and trading and visiting, and things were going better. But to all of a sudden change that policy and get in opposition, you know, to Russia and what they were doing, I think was, you know, the wrong way to go. I'm much more interested in you know, working with countries and trading with countries rather than trying to compete with them in some serious spots in the world, like in Syria. I don't think that should be our concern.
And just finally on this point, Ron, not much of an international outcry of another example of international law being breached, because these deconfliction zones weren't agreed by the Syrian government. So it's easily argued that this is actually a breach, again, of international law, but again, no widespread outcry.
Well, I'm not quite sure I got all that question asked, so could you really briefly
sure. No, I'm just saying,
and tell me what was the incident?
Yes, the essence is, here we have another example of America breaching international law, but there doesn't seem to be widespread condemnation.
Yeah, I think that is the case. I think when you talk about international law when it comes to Syria, you know, the UN and the various countries, including the legitimate government of Syria, has developed a zone where they wanted to de-escalate, and then we go in and we do something else. We're acting outside the law. We weren't endorsed by the United Nations and not by international law. And as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't serve our interests. It doesn't serve United States national security. Instead of people saying, yeah, we have to go over there and do this stuff for our national security, there's a lot of us that don't believe that it is necessary, that it undermines our national security. And I think our involvement in so many places around the world has been more negative for our own security and doesn't help us at all. And so I think that we're not on the side at this particular time, you know, in Syria, matter of fact, in most of the Middle East, on the side of international law, and yet we've invested a lot. A lot has been invested. A lot of people have died over this, and one of these days, I think the American people will wake up and say enough is enough. We don't need to be over there. We're not defending our freedoms by going over there. We need to have a change in our foreign policy, and that's why I was hopeful with our new president because he had, a much healthier attitude with Russia, and that's what I was hoping for. But then again, lately I haven't been able to figure out exactly, what is going on and what his position is, because he has shifted his viewpoints, and he's closer now to our neoconservatives who sort of are in charge of our foreign policy than he was when he was elected. But then again, he hints that maybe we should have better relations with Russia. That, of course, is what I encourage.
While you're here, Ron, could I just ask you about the James Comey hearing that took place just a few hours ago? I know we're changing topic here, but do you think this has put the matter of Russian interference and the matter of Donald Trump trying to put pressure on Comey to drop the investigation, does it put this to bed? What were your takeaways from today's hearing?
Well, I think it's going to come out that Trump is really in much better shape, and it looks like Comey is in worse shape because they've caught him in contradictions of not following our procedures and reporting if he had been suspicious of some illegalities or some pressures. He had a responsibility to report that to his superiors. This even occurred with the last administration, with Lynch, and some other things that he was releasing. So it looks like Comey has, overstepped his bounds, and I can't think that it can do anything but help Trump on this. And of course, I think most of this is a facade. I think this whole idea that our whole nation is held on this idea that Russia was involved in our election, I think that's just all, just plain fake. And it doesn't mean that I don't think Russia might not have an incentive to be involved and know something about it. I think every nation knows about what's going on, but we're probably the worst ones ever that got interfering in other people's elections. But I think this is going to be helpful in pointing out that Trump is probably more correct than the other side. But we as a country have been involved. I just looked at some statistics. Since 1946, we've been involved over 100 times in the internal affairs of elections and regime changes and assassinations, and that's the kind of foreign policy that a lot of us would like to see changed. And I think when people feel this frustration, so I don't think all these hearings are about political shenanigans, and they want us to concentrate on these charges made that Russia has taken over our elections, which I quite frankly think is preposterous. But that doesn't mean I don't think they weren't interested, and they probably could talk to American people, and even people going into administration. People in government do that all the time. And it's not like it was a unique event, but it was blown out way out of proportion. So these hearings had to do with politics, not really about finding the truth about what's happening.
And with regard to Trump's lawyer saying effectively that Comey had admitted that he was one of the leakers of privileged information, and perhaps authorities could take action against him and other leakers too, presumably a number of people might be concerned tonight, might they, when they hear this?
Take any action against whom again?
Against the leakers.
Comey, or what?
No, he accused, basically, Trump's lawyer said that Comey was one of the leakers of information to the press, of privileged information.
Oh, yeah.
And essentially action could be taken against him and others.
I think there's a realistic opportunity or a chance that could happen. Alan Dershowitz, a famous attorney here, liberal attorney, says that no matter what was said and done, the president's on constitutional and legal grounds on everything that he's done so far. You might not have to agree what he was doing, but constitutionally he was legal. But I don't think you can say that about Comey. I think he has overstepped his bounds. He wanted to be independent. He didn't report when he should have reported it, and that he was acting like he didn't have a boss, and that's what happens in dictatorships, and that's and I think Trump has a point there. It remains to be seen how far that goes, But they've opened up the doors to this, and so for my viewpoint, this is a distraction from some of the more important issues, and that to me is our foreign policy in the Middle East, Ukraine and Syria. I think those foreign policy things are bigger issues, rather than being distracted about everything Comey said and who's been charged and how the Russians were involved with elections, that sort of thing. So, but I think Trump is right that there could be some charges filed against Comey for misleading and abusing the laws.
Yeah, and with regard to Trump's relationship with the media, how do you think that will fare in the future?
With whom?
With the media, with the American media, because essentially Trump's...
the media. Yeah, I don't think it's going to help Trump. They're going to be angrier than ever, and if he wins, they just get more upset than ever. So he will have to challenge it. But the media, along with very important figures in the organized Republican and Democratic Party, are very much in charge of the foreign policy. And although Trump has yielded to that group, the neoconservatives, I think they still fear him because he's independent. So the media is always going to be after Trump. They don't want to have an independent thinker there, and that's why I thought it was such a shame that he backed off on the original intent. I see nothing wrong with somebody that's going to be in his administration talking about what they talked about in public anyway, because he did say that there was something not quite right with sanctions against Russia, and then he changed his mind on that. So I wished that if he understood, if the president understands that the that the media is the problem, and he can contest with them, maybe he will change his attitude about foreign policy. But unfortunately right now it's in flux, and it's hard to predict exactly what will happen and exactly what our policies are when it comes to our dealing with Saudi Arabia and Iran and these various positions. But of course I will continue to argue the case that we have a true pro-American foreign policy, that we mind our own business and protect our liberties here at home, because I want to set a standard here where we know what civil liberties are, we know what free markets are, and we know what non-intervention really means, and set a standard. Yes, I want to have an influence around the world, but it's a voluntary influence that you set good standards, you become a very prosperous country, you protect civil liberties of everybody, but you don't kowtow to the people who control things behind the scenes and orchestrates and control our foreign policy of interventionism and pursuit around the world.
OK, Ron, look, a delight to talk to you. We have to leave it there, though, for now. Thank you very much for your time. That was Ron Paul, former US Congressman from Texas. Thank you.
Thank you.